put a book together as promised, and I realized that I needed to do a little bit more to prep pages for the book. I've done some dyeing with, this is coffee dye, and this is avocado dye. But I want to add more character. I do have lots of tucks and belly bands and things like that, but I want to put a little bit more paint and ink and things like that on the pages before I assemble it. It's a lot harder once you've stitched it together. So I pulled out my Gelli Plate. If you haven't used a Gelli Plate before, what you're going to need is the Gelli Plate. I use a 12 by 12 because I use large papers. If you just do cards, you can get away with a little one. I have a brayer, which is used to smooth the paper out over the paint. And I have rollers. They're different brands. This one warped a little bit so that it actually puts a line in it, but this one stayed pretty well. You can buy it for inking. For putting ink on stamps and getting it evenly distributed. A lot of times if people do where they hand carve rubber stamps, they use these. But it works really well for putting the paint down really thinly, because if you have too much paint in each layer, it won't dry, and you can't do the fancy image transfers and things like that make it so fun. So I'm going to start off by putting some white paint down. You do have to think about it like you're painting in reverse. So whatever I want to be the top color is what I put down first. And in this case, I'm putting it down, but I'm also going to pull it back up again. So it's not going to just be a white piece of paper, I promise. That would be very boring. You do kind of have to spread it out lightly, and if it's too thick, you can get a little bit off and go back on and try to even it out. You can see where like chunks of dried paint get on there. This one still puts a little bit of a line. I don't use them often enough, really, so they kind of warp when they get dry. Okay, so I ripped out an image from a magazine, and I'm going to show you how you can do an image transfer. Basically, we're using the ink on the paper to pull up the paint. So you're putting it on, pressing it in, and you let it stick for a little bit. The perfect timing, there's no magic, because it all depends on how much paint. I'll probably mess up a bunch of them before I get one right. Oh, you can kind of see the shadow of their faces. Let's see if I can rip another one off here, just for the experiment of doing it. So you can see what you want to get rid of the words, because the words would just come out backwards or not at all. I'm going to put him here. Ooh, I might have messed that one up. You got to be careful not to pull the paper with you when you're pushing it down. And you only want it to stick for a few seconds and then pull it up. See, that one I don't think I left it on there long enough. We could do some up on the top too. Let's see if I can just grab. These two are super cute. I'm just tearing these off quickly because I started off cutting them out, and then I realized that I had totally messed up and wasn't making the paint thin enough, so I had to start over. I only do this like maybe once a year, and I make a bunch of pages and just do a bunch of images You don't have to do images. It's just what I like to do a lot of image transfers. That one you can really see their faces. You see that? Let me pull it down so you can see it better. Once you do the image, there, now it'll zoom in on it so you can see that they're eating together. Now we're going to let that dry. I'm going to put a contrasting color paint over the top of it. And when you put new paint down, it will bind to the old paint and pull it off the Gelli plate. Now, it's not always perfect. I am not an expert at this by any means. If you want to learn more, there is a YouTuber called Carrie the Crafter, and he is amazing with the Gelli plate. So you can look him up and watch his videos and be amazed and maybe learn a few things. But for now, see if I can fan it to dry it a little faster. I think that might have been the only one that the image really shows, but we won't know till we put the paper down over it. It's definitely a science experiment every time I do it, but fun. And if you're not trying to do image transfers, you can do some amazing stuff with a Gelli plate. The hardest part about doing a Gelli plate, though, is waiting, because it takes a while for it to dry. And if you try to put the paint on too soon, it'll just smear the image you just put on there. Maybe I'll take this time to look for another image. I think we're dry enough now. I guess we're gonna find out. I think I'll do maybe a gold or a yellow. I'm trying to think of the colors of other things that I've been working on. Yeah, I'm gonna do a gold and we'll see how this comes out. That's such a pretty color. Hopefully the metal in it doesn't mess it up. We're just oh so lightly rolling it on. Don't press hard or you'll just rub that original image right off. And just be patient. So now I'm just going to stick a piece of paper over it, and I think I'm going to do this half on the bottom of this page. We want to pull all of it off, so it's okay to leave it sit. I'm actually going to split this in half and put it onto two different pieces of paper. I don't think those bottom ones turned out, so I'm not as worried about, oh geez, and then I messed up. I might have put the paint on too thick. I don't know. We'll find out in a minute. I am going to let it sit for a little while and try to get all the air bubbles out of this paper. That's the joy of the brayer, so you don't end up with like your handprints. Okay. I'm going to pull this one off first because I don't care if it gets ruined. Oh, I didn't pull it all off, but let's see if we can see the image. Nope. Oh. Let's see about this one. Ooh, it's better. I could have probably waited a little bit longer and gotten a better pull on it. You can see their images, but they look a little deformed just from it is interesting. It's a shadow of the image, so I guess the gold isn't going to work too well. I am going to pull the rest of this off. I think I'm just going to put, let's see, just put a plain color down and get it nice and wet and pull this off. It's easier to pull the paint off onto paper than it is to clean a Gelli plate. I mean, once you're done and you can stick it under the sink, that's different, but when you're in between pages, the best way to get paint off is with other paint. So this can be a good way to decorate the back of paper that you have that's only one-sided. Try to line it up as well as possible. There. Now I'm going to let it sit for a little bit and start to thicken up before I pull this off. Oh, come on. Oh, maybe I'll have to do 2 pulls. I put a little too much yellow. I'll set that aside and I'll do another one. And then we're just going to go to old-fashioned cleaning. That's better. There we go. Now we're talking. Look at that. Doesn't that make a cool pattern? If you're going to do Gelli plating, you just have to know that you're going to make a mess. There's no getting around it. I think I'm going to try black this time. And we'll see if it'll be a little bit harder to clean up. And you don't need that much paint. I end up putting too much on, and then that's half the problem, is that. And you don't have to do the whole plate either if you're just doing a smaller piece of paper, but I seem to do better with spreading it out if I just do the whole thing. In other words, I go too thick. There we look at how satiny that is. That's the thickness you want. Alright, I'm doing an umbrella woman. We'll see if we can tell if it's an umbrella woman when all is said and done. Okay, it went on a little crooked, but that's okay. Taking my time, doing it slowly. Get a little bit of paint on my brayer, but that's okay. Alright, I'm going to pull this up slowly because I want to see. Ooh, that might not leave an image. Oh, that's too bad. Interesting. I just pulled the whole thing up. Okay. It got too tacky. Let's see if I have something else that might work. Let's try a red. Now that was that's too much. That was a matte paint just now, that black. And I don't know if that makes a difference because I don't usually buy a lot of chalk or matte paint unless I'm doing something where I'm going to age it with some kind of, like where you put like a varnish over it or something like that after it dries. Let's try this one. And maybe do it a little bit faster this time. See if that helps. I don't, timing wise, I just never seem to get it quite right. Is that gonna, ooh, there we go. That left an image. Ooh. Maybe you can't see everybody, but you can see her. So, we gotta let it dry though and not get ahead of ourselves. Unfortunately, you only get one try with each image. You could print things, and the printed images will work for the transfer, but I usually use up parts of old magazines because, like, the bigger images, I don't use them as much on the pages, but they're great for image transfers on the Gelli Plate, because if they're too small you can't really see them when you're just pulling paint off like that. One thing too, you could take a paper, let's see if I can do it this time. You could take a paper and press it down before it fully dries and not put a second paint on there. Let's see if it'll pull up. You just gotta take your time. It's gonna be cool. Oh yeah, that one looks beautiful. They're very haunting. So can you see the images of the people in there? It just looks so neat. So that's without putting a second paint on there, and that, honestly, that might be the best bet for me because I am so impatient. I pull it up too soon. But you end up with some really cool things when you're done. And maybe you don't use them all in one project, but you can make some really amazing patterns on papers using a Gelli Plate. So if you have stencils, bubble paper, you can buy different like shaped brushes. You can use a bunch of different types of texture things, stamps, as long as you're willing to put paint on them. I'm going to do a couple pages using the Gelli Plate in front of you so you can kind of see how it works. Remember that you're working opposite, so you're going to do the top layer first. So you want to do your smaller patterns that are going to be at the very front first. So if I put some polka dots here and then I paint over them with other colors, the polka dots will be in the front. I'm going to use the rule of threes and do everything 3 times. 1 or 3 times. It's just the rule of odds, I guess. It looks better to me if I stick to odd numbers when I'm putting things down on paper. Then it doesn't look like you're trying to do something symmetrical and failing at it. I'm going to do some bigger paint circles. Now these will show up behind the circles that you already put down. And they're going to dry as you go. You don't want to rub paint over paint that hasn't dried yet. So keep that in mind. I'm also going to work my way off the paper so that there isn't a weird line wherever I set the paper down on. I might randomly put a dot there. That looks kind of cool. Alright, so now I'm going to let that dry a little bit, and I got to figure out what stencil I want to use. I want one that has bigger holes because I don't want to fight with getting the paint to go through it. I think I might just use this one. Let's see. We'll do red. Make it a little bit wetter because I want it to go through. Let's just try it in one section here that doesn't have other paint still. So I can blot it on. You don't really want to, there, that looks cool. You don't want to use brush strokes if at all possible because it'll pull that paint off that you already have put down. I think I'm going to do some here. I think it's dried enough that this will work. There. Ooh, that looks cool. All right, so it's got to dry, and then we're going to put some paint over the top of it and pull it off. I'm sure this looks a hot mess with everything on my table, but I haven't tried to use a heater on it to dry it. I just feel like it probably wouldn't do the Gelli Plate any good. I am not experienced enough, and I'm not willing to accidentally ruin the Gelli Plate out of my own impatience. My impatience taking over. I'm doing multiple pages at once, so I'm not worried about perfection, obviously. That kind of put a cool stripe on there. I think I oversaturated this paper. I don't really ever think of any of these as failures because they always end up looking cool, even if it wasn't at all what I intended. So, I don't know. I grabbed a couple more stencils, and I'm going to add some stencil art. I think I know I have papers everywhere drying. I'm going to add some, well, I don't, maybe not green. I don't want to look too Christmas-ish, but, well, maybe. Let's just do it. And I'm using the same one because, honestly, I don't care if it's perfect. I'm going to blot this on. This is like a brick wall stencil. I don't go all the way to the edge with stencils. I just kind of do a mix in the center and off the page. That's cool. We're basically just building up layers of stenciling here. Alright, it's mostly dry. It's so hard to be patient with these things. So I'm spreading a layer of paint over the whole page. I'm going to use two, how do I want to do this? I guess I'm going to do one full and then I'll do the stripe down center of one. I like how that turns out. And then I can do the same thing here. Put a stripe. So basically, as I move this around, it's going to put paint on the exposed paper, but not on the rest. So by putting a bunch down at once, I actually put some decoration on all of it. It works great if I just use a 12 by 12, but I'm making pages to fit in a specific size, and I'll have a lot of thick cardstock paper, but I don't want it to all be thick cardstock paper. Okay, I'm going to let it sit for a little bit and thicken, get tacky to the paper. In other words, it's not all going to pull off of that Gelli plate, so I have to practice patience. That's why I don't do these very often, because I'm really not a patient person. While this one sits, I'll show you a few of the other papers that are done. I probably won't show you the process of making all of them, but I have a few smaller pages with bits of pattern. I added some green dots to it because I was cleaning off my brush. I have a few image transfers. A few pages from cleaning that turned out pretty cool. I have a few failed attempts, because there's always going to be a couple of those. I get some interesting stuff from cleaning things off. This one turned out kind of cool. And that one I did too much paint, and that's what happens if you overuse the paint when you put it down. Alright, let's pull this one off first. That one kind of stuck to the paper, but that's okay. That one. Okay, is it ready? Might not fully be ready. It's still pretty wet. The thing with using this kind of thin paper is it does want to kind of pull apart from the paper. Oh, I think that's coming off pretty good. I could be more patient and it would turn out better, but check that out. That is a success. Now, if only I could be that patient every time, but you know, the reason I was able to be patient with this one is that my battery died on my camera, so I had to walk away. Maybe I need my battery to die more often. I'm pulling it off slowly because I don't want to end up with a big splotch that didn't pull off. The center is always going to be a little bit wetter and more fragile. Look at that. Beautiful. There's many layers of paint on that one. Very cool. I'm going to leave that one to dry. Alright, well, now that we have papers prepped, my next video I'll actually put all this stuff together. I hope you had fun watching this crazy mess, and now you understand why I don't do it very often.